Hello everyone, welcome to Psych, and today I want to share with you a visual conceptualization I made for extroverted intuition and introverted intuition. Now I actually made this a few months ago and it's up as a blog post on my website, psych.com, if you're interested in kind of reading this, and I'll include that down in the description box below. But this is something that I thought was interesting and I just wanted to share with you all, and it's just a visual representation of how I think the functions extroverted intuition and introverted intuition essentially work. Let's get into it. So we're going to start by looking at a graph type of thing with 3 dimensions. So imagine an X, Y, and Z graph. Now in the illustration I'm going to bring up, I think it's Z where Y would normally be, and I don't know why it is like that, but that doesn't really matter. So just imagine X, Y, and Z, 3-dimensional graph. Now when you think of intuition and you think of how it's described in either MBTI, Jungian terms, or socionics, we often associate it with kind of being temporal, as in associated and related to time or ideas within time. So one of the things that kind of stood out to me when I was thinking about extroverted intuition versus introverted intuition is that introverted intuition tends to be more so concerned with the concept of ideas or singular ideas over longer periods of time, as compared to extroverted intuition, which tends to be more concerned with the multiple and multiples of ideas that are within a given kind of moment of time. So now looking at this graph where we have the X, Y, and Z, X and Z represents kind of the flat plane. So now think of this specific flat plane as a singular moment in time. So X and Z in this example are a singular moment in time where all of space is kind of represented, all of infinite space, everywhere in the universe is represented within this X and Z flat 2D surface. Now the Y line here, the one that kind of pierces between the X and Z, is going to be the concept of time. So each flat X and Z surface is a moment in time, and as you travel across Y, you have time progressing throughout or progressing forward. So essentially, within each moment of time across the Y-axis, there's going to be infinite possibilities due to the infinite expression of the X and Z axis, but also there's going to be infinite moments of time because Y is moving infinitely forward. So you have kind of 2 dimensions of infinite possibilities. Now, what you're going to see is the difference between extroverted intuition and introverted intuition is how they interact with these kind of planes. Now let's take a single moment in time, which is represented by one singular piece of the X and Z axis. So imagine you picked any moment in time from the Y axis and it was then represented by the X and Z axis, which is entirely flat. So we're not interacting with Y, we're just interacting with X and Z at this particular moment. Let's say you then scattered 6 dots onto this graph or this kind of flat surface. And each of these dots represents a singular concept, idea, or archetypal thought that could be potentially thought of when interacting with a specific situation or moment of time. What extroverted intuition is going to do is notice the connections between these specific concepts and ideas within any given moment of time. Now, what extroverted intuition doesn't do nearly as often is interact with the Y-axis. Extroverted intuition might be able to notice how something is going to come out over time, but the distance in which it travels across the Y-axis is not nearly the same as what you would find in introverted intuition. If we were to look at introverted intuition to contrast this, we would say that introverted intuition instead does not connect the lines between the dots in a singular moment in time, but instead you could take these same 6 dots, concepts, ideas, and stretch them across the Y-axis to kind of extrapolate and assume what is likely to happen across the Y-axis. How is this idea going to change over time? Instead of how is this idea connected to all of the other concepts and ideas within this singular piece and moment of time that I am currently within. Both of the intuitive functions can come to very similar conclusions by very indirect methods. So say, for example, we look at extroverted intuition again. Extroverted intuition may not be directly interacting with the Y-axis, as in it's not going to be directly interacting with time in terms of how it's processing concepts and ideas, but by developing a complete understanding of all of the concepts within a given moment of time, they're able to come to a kind of complete picture, which then allows them to maybe extrapolate or think about how that complete picture might be represented across time. They're not initially going to be seeing that, but by seeing the overarching kind of connection between these things, the complete picture is then presented to them and they better understand something. And through that understanding, they can then assume what might happen, but they're not initially perceiving that. Now, introverted intuition, on the other hand, is kind of weirder in how it might come to, say, for example, extroverted intuition types of conclusions. The weird thing you have to think about with introverted intuition is imagine that those arrows coming across that Y plane can also be coming from behind you. So an idea or concept that you thought about, 5 or 10 years ago is still continuing in that straight line forward on a subconscious level. And you might find that it's going to pierce through the current moment of time that an individual is within and touch on an idea that is existing within that given moment of time. And it's going to be that which causes those kind of introverted intuitive moments, where that idea from an experience that you had or something in the past, which is piercing through the time axis, now connects subconsciously with something that you're understanding in the current moment. It essentially pierced through into an idea across the time axis instead of across the singular moment that you are existing within. Both of these types of intuitions, of course, have their upsides and downsides. Both are going to have things that they excel at, and both are going to have things that they struggle at. For example, because extroverted intuition is able to notice all of the or most of the concepts and ideas within a given moment in time, they're much more spontaneous when it comes to the recognition and production of ideas and concepts. They're essentially able to be more outwardly creative with how they come up and associate themselves with ideas. They're going to be the ones who are typically, inventors, artists, these sorts of things. Now, the introverted intuitive types are going to have the benefit of maybe noticing how things might happen or unfold over time when it comes to a singular thing that they're really kind of focusing on. But the issue that introverted intuitive types tend to face is that they're almost blind to these outer ideas because they tend to be so focused on a singular thing. It's like when you look inside of a telescope, you can see very clearly the long distance away because of the telescope, but you can't see anything in your peripheral vision because you're just looking very deeply at this one specific thing. That's kind of how introverted intuition is going to be dealing with the realm of ideas and concepts. They're focusing very narrowly and very forward on more singular versions of ideas as compared to extroverted intuition, which is able to kind of focus on all these exterior things, all these kind of in-the-moment ideas, but they're going to be maybe missing looking inside of the telescope to see what is going to be happening over the course of time. All right, everybody, that is my conceptualization of kind of how I think about how introverted intuition and extroverted intuition interact with the concept of space and time, essentially. Now, remember that these are just my kind of theories here. This is not something that's going to be concrete. I wouldn't even say this is how Jung or Briggs explained these concepts. This is just my personal way of understanding these things and their relationship to the recognition of ideas and concepts in relation to time. If you enjoyed this and you thought it was interesting, let me know down in the comment section below. Tell me what you think of this idea. Is there a better way that this could have been said? This is very just kind of hypothetical, so if you have a better way of saying it, feel free to do so. Other than that, I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurasec.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura from Asurasec. Have a good one.